So hello and welcome to the first podcast in our series where we explore the future of the actuarial profession. My name is Gareth Grook and I'm joined today by IFoA President Suee Chieh. How are you today, Chieh?
I'm well, thank you, Gareth. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for making time to talk to us today. We're hopeful for a really interesting discussion. So without further ado, I want to dive right into it. My first question is about vision. So one of the really big topics in the actuarial profession right now is the need to articulate a new vision of what the profession is and what it could contribute to the world. So what is this vision and how would it be different from the old one?
I suppose there are three words about a vision which is really important and we've got to get our head around it. It is about being impactful, being influential, and being relevant. Yeah, and you can't be impactful unless you are influential, and you can't be influential unless you are relevant. And really, so that we can be effective in three areas at our workplace, in the industry we work in, which is largely the financial services industry, but now it's going beyond that. And of course, in the society we lived in. But there was nothing wrong about the old vision, but I said that things have changed. Firstly, in the response to the digital revolution and the fourth industrial revolution. And the things we need to do at our workplace is fast changing, and we need to acquire new skill sets and mindsets in order to thrive. And in the last 6 to 12 months, or even the last 2 years, deep-seated uncertainties in the systems we operate in has come to the foreground. And actuaries deals with risks and uncertainties for us to be effective. So in order to continue to be relevant, influential and impactful, we got to acquire slightly different mindsets in order to thrive. So I had a look at our old vision statements about making financial sense of the future. That was about 20 years ago, and it spoke to the zeitgeist of the time. Yeah, and I saw the 2016 one, which is the last time we do a revision. It was also indicative of a more stable world. Yeah, and the language is there. But the world we saw in the last 2 years, especially with the advent of the digital challenges and the issues our members face, calls for a fresh look in terms of the vision as well as the language to make it more compelling, more inspirational, and also speaking to the potential of the profession, which I think is a wonderful time because it is a great reset for us.
Thank you, Chieh. So I guess what I'm hearing there is it's about being relevant to a world that's changed quite profoundly in the last 20 years, still having important contributions to make. Yes,
definitely. All the roles we have been playing in the last 20 years will continue to be relevant. But as Bill Gates say, we always overestimate the degree of change in the next 2 years, but underestimate the change over time. Yeah, it's almost like swimming. I was told by my recent tutor about doing the backstroke. If you get yourself misaligned, you could drift very far off and hit the side of the pool, because over the next 20 years, you're going to hit the side of the pool unless you get yourself straight. So the trajectory which we are at is such that we will see small changes, but if we are not ready to change for it, we could be adrift. Yeah. So I think that is really important that we get our mindset around it. We cannot stop the world from changing, and possibly we can't change it too much by the nature of the size of a profession. But we are masters of our own destiny. We can control and manage our response to the change. Yeah? And that is about strategy and how we position the profession, choosing our mindset to respond to the uncertainty, in my view, grasping it with opportunity and with courage and with imagination.
Great stuff. So I love the analogy of swimming and doing the backstroke, and you might not collide with the side of the pool immediately, but you will if you don't change your trajectory. So sticking with that, Chieh, how would this vision of what actuaries could be affect the way actuaries operate today? So how do they need to change their trajectory today?
Okay, so I drew another analogy just now about Bill Gates about 1 or 2 years, because tomorrow, when our actuaries go to work, nothing much is going to change in the next 3 months, 6 months. Over the next 2 to 5 to 10 years, things will change. And we could take maybe 2 or 3 examples. Say, for instance, our established actuaries in traditional fields, things are feeling a bit different, right? Climate factors and climate risk has come to the foreground. In the past, we often just look at longevity risk. We just look at interest rate risk, but climate risk is clearly in the foreground. And only a month ago, the Council adopted a wide-ranging climate risk report unanimously. And in fact, in the last 4 days, we are debating about going further about IFoA and the profession taking a position on being carbon neutral, and that percolates down. Yeah, so that is for an actuary working in a traditional field, a more senior actuary. But even then, but apart from that, they have to deal with things like negative interest rates. Yeah, which is not something we heard before. So our new skill sets of going to those areas will be highly relevant. But for the younger actuary in traditional fields, whether they are Aviva, AXA, or Prudential, or in consulting firms, they are very keenly aware that the work they do are going to be impacted by new configurations of digital finance, digital platforms, and the way the insurance industry will be organized. Yeah, so this is for people in traditional fields. But you look further beyond. We have actuaries working in fintech. We have actuaries working in health ecosystems like Discovery in South Africa, or even in data science consultancy. So all the roles are changing. We cannot be too detailed in saying that what will happen. But what we need to make sure we have is that we have the mindset to adapt. Yeah, and I think the key word is not about good or bad. The key word is diversity. What we want is a diversity of mindsets, because the problems are getting more complex, and all actuaries will understand this. A diversified investment portfolio is a more resilient portfolio and a more efficient portfolio. You might have some very great stocks in banking, but we just shouldn't just have banking stocks. You should have tech stocks, pharmaceutical stocks, retail stocks. Then it's a resilient portfolio. Likewise, our mindsets, it cannot just be accuracy and consistency. We need adaptability. We need the learning mindset. We need imagination. But it's not to say that everyone would have strong capabilities in all, but we need to have a blend so that the profession will thrive.
Thank you, Suee. And earlier on, you spoke about the need for a different mindset and diversity of opinion, and how that was intrinsic to this new vision. So how important is this new way of thinking to our future success? And what would be the benefits to actuaries themselves and to the wider world, the wider society they operate in?
I have been, Gareth, I've been reflecting on this for, especially in the COVID-19 period. I had the benefit of very good colleagues in the council and also outside the council, and we're thinking about this, right? And I think that we have tremendous strength in what I call the quintessential values of accuracy and consistency and cautiousness and reticence. And we are very capable in dealing with problems which require systematic change. Yeah? So we are able to go in to the product system, the pension system, and make it better, more reliable. Yeah. And those set of values are extremely important for reserve roles. Yeah. But if you are going to new areas where we need, that is a systematic mindset, and that speaks to accuracy and consistency, yeah, and detailedness, yeah, level of detail. But if you go into digital and fourth industrial revolution, what you want is an innovative mindset, and innovative which requires you to be experimental, curious, adaptable, and a bit entrepreneurial, and a bit of a perseverance, and never say die. That's a growth mindset. So that second box of values speaks to the innovative mindset. So we have the systematic mindset and the innovative mindset. But then in the last 12 months, we realized that it is not necessarily about innovation or systematic changes. When we see problems like COVID-19 interlocking with climate change and climate risk, the biodiversity loss, Black Lives Matter, income inequality, and economic and health insecurity, you realize that you are dealing with systemic changes. And for systemic changes, you need a systemic mindset, which is about thinking that this orthodoxy, it is not about improving it. We got to change the orthodoxy. Yeah. So we could be refining very important parts of a ship, but maybe we shouldn't be traveling at all, or maybe we should be using the plane, right? So the systematic mindset is about dealing with the system, but a systemic problem calls for altering or replacing the system, and that is really the big thought leadership of our time. And for that, we will need courage, imagination, but not just in unwise way, not just in a reckless way, but using it with judgment. And if you look into the literature of the last 100 or 200 years, and that was what our forefathers were good at, pondering at risk and uncertainty, and then coming up with good judgment. And they yielded to us the Gaussian or the probabilistic distribution, which captured most of our work. But I think most thinkers and commentators today say that our systems are not strong enough or comprehensive enough to capture the other remaining uncertainty, which is actually causing the systemic changes of our time. So if you like, we have been strong in systematic thinking in the last 15, 20 years, but we need to be good innovative thinkers with digital and fourth industrial. And lastly, we've got to be good systemic thinkers. And so therefore, we need to become good systems thinker.
And we need the courage, imagination, and judgment to tie all that together and to realize the benefits.
I beg your pardon, say that again.
And to paraphrase Suee Chieh, we need the courage, imagination, and judgment to tie all that together and to realize the benefits.
That's correct. But I did sort of box it in a convenient way, but of course it's not so black and white. But if you look at the presidential speeches of the last 20 years or 40 years, starting with Reddington, Nick Dumbrack, Peter Clark, Jeremy Guilford, Ronald Bowie, and the government actuary, the name slipped my mind, but it'll come back. They all speak to the same space, yeah. But if you weave it all together, it is actually quite logical. And we need different mindsets for different things. And I think, Gary, you'll be fair to say, for a variety of reasons in the last 15 years, since the Morris Review, where there was new regulation which was more prescriptive, we have experienced a bit of an intellectual retreat. So you went more into systematic thinking, trying to put our house in order to do all the technical standards. But I think that is still of fundamental importance to us. But we need to create space, to borrow Reddington's phrase, to create space for imagination and for impulse, because an overdeveloped strength in systematic thinking is actually a weakness.
Thank you, Suee Chieh. So that was fascinating, actually. We spoke about this new mindset where not to be too black and white about it, but where courage, imagination, and judgment, and diversity of thought, diversity of approach can help us move into this growth space, this systemic space. So how do you think this new mindset would come about, and how practically Could it be developed? How could it be kind of incubated?
Okay, I think this work is done over a period of last 12 to 24 months. So our language and our declaration by the leadership, by the presidential team, and by the CEO Stephen Mann and by Graham has to be very clear that we are changing, we are implementing VSMD, vision, skill sets, mindsets, and domains, and we have to be consistent over time. So the declaration has to be important, and what we pay attention to will create the change. And I think that things we have to pay attention to is about positioning the profession. We have to position the profession in a coherent way to our members, to our new joiners, and to the world at large. And we have to promote the profession in the same way. And then the role models which we seek to portray has to be diverse about opportunities and consistent with our story. And I think of fundamental importance is Project Moonshot, the way how we train, how do we recruit, how do we develop our members in the future. We spent a lot of time in the last 4 months thinking about how because our offering is very much about education, but we are fundamentally going to change the way we train, educate actuaries over the lifetime. The focus will be on learning rather than to be on exams. And the focus and it will be lifelong learning rather than a qualification like an FIA or associates. And I think, and we are also keen to do it in a rapid way, which reflect the needs of our students and our members, and not just do it in a very which takes a long time to change. Yeah, so we intend to modularize our training, and more importantly, we are not going to be based on our legacy considerations, but rather on needs of the students and partnering people. So the whole educational program of the institute and faculty will be supporting actuaries not only until qualification but beyond. But the key is not just education, the key is the mindset. And the mindset one is not something you could sort of switch something and then people will just turn, but I think it's the encouragement. It is about the role modeling. It's about articulation of our proposition and to be patient over time. Yeah. So I think there are a number of cycles. I think the 2 to 4 year cycle where IFoA as an institution is going through fundamental change. That has to be helped by the Chief Executive Stephen Mann and Graham, the Chair of the Management Board, and succeeding presidents. Yeah. But the story for the profession going to be longer term, and we rely on the institution to provide the support structure so that we can continue to engage our members. And our story has to be consistent and not to be to vacillate from one president to another. I'm very fortunate to be supported by Luis, who is very aligned in our vision for the profession. And I think that is important. But if you look backwards, John Taylor, before that, Jules, Marjorie, Colin, and I was reflecting on what they say. Colin was very much about thought leadership, and Marjorie was very much about the digital world, about being future fit, and Jules said something about the voice of the profession, and he was concerned that the voice of the profession is not strong, and he's used the word stepping out of the shadows. Yeah. John was very practical. He was very into two things, data science and consumer finance. And all these actually are really different strands of the VSMD strategy. And it's really, if you can hold that story for the next 2 to 4 years, 2 to 3 years, and have the culture and the governance to support it, I think we will create the flywheel for change. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Suee Chieh. I was writing some notes as we were speaking, and I wrote down language, leadership, and learning as kind of critical elements of this mindset change. Do you think that's a fair reflection?
I certainly like language, leadership, and learning. I think leadership is probably on top. Yeah. So I would say language, learning. I think the middle word I would suggest maybe is attention. Yeah. We can have the language and learning, but I think it's the way we place our attention and to be self-aware that we are often trying to get it so right, so accurate that sometimes we lose the opportunity of moving on. And I used a phrase the other day, and I think Stephen quite liked it. And I say that we want our people to lift the plank up, but we are standing on it. We can only lift the plank up if we step aside, and then we can lift it. So it is really a systemic, a system issue. And I think that self-awareness will be part of it. But we are in a good space. We're in good space. And it is not, it's not always 100% agreement. We have diversity. I think there's a degree of patience with one another, because I think that we feel that this is a great inflection point for us to take advantage of. And we, as a profession and as a group of individuals, a good time to respond to the opportunities. Yeah.
Excellent. Oh, just as an aside, Chieh, you mentioned Project Moonshot earlier on. For those people who aren't aware of what Project Moonshot is and what it refers to, would you mind offering a quick
Okay.
overview?
Of course. Members of the profession or IFoA will know vision, skill sets, mindsets, and domains, which we have talked in a presidential address, but those are still very conceptual, and the management board and executive need to reduce it further down so that they can become implementable plans. Yeah, implementable plans, and that work took about 3 months. Yeah, which is actually a fairly impressive period. But we had about 8 to 10 people. The chair of the Life and Learning Board, Helen Wright, and Professor Carl Striking was in it. Stephen and Graham were in it, Andrew Ria and I. And then we had a couple of professors, Professor Andrew Smith from Dublin University, and someone else from University of East Anglia. Sorry, I can't remember all the names. But we worked to really talk about the philosophy, and actually by our own debate, we realized it's not just about skill sets, and we were very committed to enhance data science in our curriculum, and also to create modularity and optionality at the associate level. So there's a big jump in our thinking, and also to introduce a banking fellowship in 2022, which is really a completely new area for the IFoA, and also to introduce a new credential in climate change or climate science, a certificate type credential. So that was, and we call it Moonshot because we want to do it. We want to land on the moon and land it quickly. To borrow a phrase from JFK, because the idea was to fix our vision and do what it takes to reach there. But of course, we will still be mindful of our own processes and the work plan to get there. But that was a highly aspirational and highly achievable. And only the last 2 days we were talking about maybe a credential in IFRS 17. Yeah, although that is in a traditional field, and that is desired by our actuaries universally, and we want to do it quickly, because the opportunity is there to meet the needs of our members. Yeah, so Moonshot capture the work plan, but I think more importantly, the spirit and the intent of the council, as well as and the management team. Yeah.
Thank you, Chieh. So it's been quite an inspiring discussion about the future of the profession, but what do you think the profession needs to retain from the way it currently works and the way it currently thinks in order to realize this success?
I think I will speak in 2 dimensions. One dimension is about values, and I want to. I quoted Reddington a great deal because I admired him. He was the chief actuary of Prudential for 17 years, just before I joined, and he is the greatest actuary, in my view, of the last 100 years. And he talked about our quintessential values, and I want to make sure that every fellow who works in the traditional fields know that that is really the core of our reputation, and also our strength. Because a lot of work we do in our traditional areas as pricing actuaries, as risk actuaries, and as valuation actuaries, Solvency II actuaries require those quintessential values of accuracy. So that is what we must retain. But that shouldn't inhibit us from benefiting and venturing out to the world of the digital revolution, because your next generation, people who are like you, whether you're in Aviva or a consulting firm or AXA or Munich Re, you will need to go to those areas, because no professions and no industries can escape that. So that is taking a longer term view. And of course, if you go into systemic thinking on sustainability and so forth, then you need even a larger canvas. So that we must keep the values. The second thing, the second dimension I want to say, so this is the first dimension. The second dimension actually come much earlier on in our strategy debate about the skill sets and mindsets we want to keep, our reputation we want to keep. What are the skill sets we want to change, and the positioning we want to change? What are the two things which are not negotiable? The first pillar of the house is our reputation for trust and integrity, anchored on the actuary's code. Yeah. So we have that sense. I'm not being critical of people who are just doing data science or statistics. They're not a profession as such. Yeah. So we have that extra about in terms of profession in practice in the financial services industry. So that pillar is highly regarded in the UK, in Singapore, in Hong Kong, in Australia, in Africa, in South Africa. We have that reputation, and that reputation of trust and integrity, and more laterally about speaking up, must be maintained. The second pillar is something we are quite strong in, but we also must retain that. We have a reputation for business judgment or practical judgment in a business context. That is the word described of IFoA actuaries, partly because of our culture and the nature of our training. And we have that, which not all societies have. I mean, I just add. So therefore, so they say that when an IFO fellow qualifies, he's ready to do the work at that level. So that speaks very highly to our culture and to our level of education and our way of practicing state. So these two pillars and the quintessential values shouldn't change. But what we want is more diversity around the values. Yeah.
Thank you, Chieh. And final question from me. What is the IFoA doing to support members to make this transition and make this new mindset and vision a reality?
I think it must be the Moonshot program, because largely it is about skill sets and also creating programs for mindsets. Yeah, so I would see a greater increase and proliferation of webinars and of discussion groups, and also changing the syllabus. I do not expect it to sort of change overnight. But as I said earlier on, once the trajectory is changed, it will grow over time. And also on a more holistic and at a more industry level or societal level, we would increasingly be more a bit bolder in terms of engaging in public opinions, and more proactive in engaging regulators, and also many senior actuaries who are not in a volunteer group. Yeah, so we are reaching out to them. So what we are trying to say is that we are trying to create a context. To create a context for change, right? Because it's not just about a syllabus, an email, or an announcement. Everything which leaders in the profession, as well as leaders in executive, must be congruent, and our webinars must be congruent. Our podcasts must be congruent. We cannot. So there must be some degree of coherence, yeah, in terms of messaging. So messaging is very important, and I'm sure you would agree with that. How we message to our members, how do we message to our incoming new students? how do we signal to the people who regulate us? Yeah, all that must tie together, and it is not about one thing. Yeah, it's about coherence and pay attention to it. And actually, change will come because we ourselves change our mindsets in the way we think of ourselves. Yeah, the way we think of ourselves, because the way we think of ourselves will then create changes in our own behaviors and our own confidence. So I would say that we are at an inflection point. I drew an analogy the other day in an interview with ERM, insurance ERM, and also in a gyro conference about us metamorphosizing like a butterfly, right? Because we took some time for us to put a transformation agenda on transformation program on the agenda, but I think we are going to the caterpillar stage, yeah, where we're getting more information and all that, and then there's quite a lot of things to think about before we go into the pupa stage, yeah, and before then we can become a butterfly. So I think we have moved into the caterpillar stage. It's not always the prettiest of stage, but it's a necessary stage, yeah. And I think that whilst it is a diverse profession and we've got many groups, working parties and practice boards, we also have a common DNA. There are many things which can unite us. And this is, I think we must choose our lens properly, a unifying lens, but with diverse talents and diverse capabilities. And then going forward, and then we could, if you can hold the lens properly, it will be a wonderful prism throwing up many different strands of light, but still pointing to the same DNA and the same prism, which is the IFoA here.
Thank you, Chieh. That feels like a great place to end our discussion. It only remains for me to say thank you so much for your time, and thank you for everybody watching. Please stay with us as we explore different aspects of the way the profession is changing.